So, I'm about to go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It's one of these Marvel movies where they give us a screening the night before the embargo lifts, so like the screening's at 8, and then the review embargo lifts at 1 p.m. tomorrow, which means I have time to watch the movie tonight, make a review overnight, and then put it up by noon, all while adhering to the guidelines for the embargo that I'll put up on the screen right now. As a result, it just means that I have a lot of time to really sit with my thoughts, so I thought I'd just start recording the video before I even go see the movie. I'm outside my apartment, so for the duration of this Rehab Monster Wildberry tea, which has a similar color scheme and taste palette to my favorite discontinued Pop-Tart ever, we'll just like prep, I guess. Okay, so this is James Gunn's last outing in the MCU. It's basically the first time in the entirety of this enterprise that a filmmaker has been able to make a trilogy from start to finish completely by himself as the writer and the director, and he's also going to be leaving to go take over the competition's entire apparatus. So it's interesting. It's an interesting inflection point in the history of modern superhero movies. I don't know if it's going to be any good or not. I've never been a huge fan of the Guardians movies. I just watched the holiday special for the first time an hour ago. Pretty fun. Going to be very useful for the Kevin Bacon game later, I suppose. But I have this weird feeling that, like, I'm going to end up actually impressed with this movie somehow. I don't like James Gunn all that much. I'm not a huge fan of his entire filmography. I've never been as in the bag for the first two movies as other people have been. But the more I think about them, and the more I sort of admire the novelty of their idiosyncrasy, I'm starting to think that maybe, like, I've been harsh on them in the past, and maybe this big blowout finale is actually going to impress me in some way. I mean, it also might not. It also might just suck. I don't know. Very good chance I'm going to hate it, but I'll be fair. I'll be back in a few. So, we just got out of the movie. Before I talk about the movie, I just want to say that if you live closest to an AMC theater, you are very lucky, because I'm not going to complain. I am walking distance from the theater I just saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3 at. I can walk out of my apartment and then be there in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes max. It's a blessing. I cannot complain. But as much as people got sick of the ironic love for the Nicole Kidman Back to the Movies commercial, you know the one. Going to a Regal and having to watch the Pepsi branded alternative to that ad with Danny Trejo and all the people chanting incongruous movie quotes, that ad is hell. That ad is one of the worst, maybe the worst things to happen in a movie theater since COVID. So here's the thing. I didn't hate it. Didn't hate the movie. Maybe really liked it. Maybe really, really liked it. When I get upstairs, I'm going to lead in with some negative thoughts about the movie, because I have those. And I want to have the caveat that James Gunn sort of dug at one of my weaknesses, which is I really care about movies about friendship and people willing to sacrifice themselves for their friends. It's like a really big weak spot for me when watching a feature film. So he kind of cheated in that regard. But I gotta say hats off to him. Alright, so it's been a few minutes. It's been 10 minutes. I watched the movie 10 minutes ago. I just got upstairs. Let's get some of the negatives out of the way first, alright? It's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. If you've previously seen either of the first two movies and you had any kind of issues with them, whether you, like me, thought that Chris Pratt was just entirely too irritating to watch on screen, or if you, like me, thought that the movie's mixture of comedy and drama never quite felt like balanced, like that sometimes it was a little bit too heavy, then other times it was like so cartoonish that it was like, eh. If you ever felt that way about the movies, you'll definitely still feel that way about Volume 3. Like, it's not a drastic departure, it's not a massive level up in that regard. It is more of the same. Like, let's just be honest. Like, it's definitely of a piece with the other two films. But it's been several years since Volume 2 came out. Like, it's been quite a few. And I liked Volume 2. I had some positive things about it. A lot of that movie sucks, but I like Kurt Russell. There's a lot of things in that movie that worked for me. The overall vibe of the Guardians films, of the 70s, like 80s needle drops and all that stuff, like I'm into it for the most part. Like, I support it. I just always was averse to the way people described these movies as like massive outliers within the MCU. People would talk about them like they're just so different and so much more like well crafted and stuff. And I was always like, I don't know about that. I mean, like I said, I'm very hit or miss when it comes to James Gunn. However, here in 2023, a lot of time has passed. He's now made 3 of these movies. He made The Suicide Squad for DC. He made The Peacemaker show for DC. He's leaving the territory now and is going over to DC Films, giving him the book. At first I kind of thought, wow, James Gunn, not who I would pick for this. But at the same time, the man's been around a long time and he's made a lot of these movies and most of them have been successful. I remember 11 years ago being in Vegas at Morrison Con, Grant Morrison's like comic book convention that was like kind of like niche and for like real diehard nerds. And I was on a panel. I wasn't on the panel. I was watching the panel. And there was a part where James Gunn and Max Landis, of all people, got into this like terrible argument over whether or not the films Super, the Rainn Wilson movie that James Gunn had made, and Chronicle, the movie that Max Landis had written, whether either of those two films were superhero movies. And their arguments were so asinine and dumb, but like, listening to Gunn, you could tell he was passionate about the topic, I guess. So it's kind of nice to see that he's made this niche for himself. But just, for me, not a guy that I'm crazy about. It's funny, I remember giving The Suicide Squad a pretty good rating when it came out, and I just barely remember the movie now. I have so little recollection of it. And going into this, the odds were not in his favor, let's say. Every MCU movie for the last few years has just been kind of like dipping in quality, and they've been very hit or miss. And the idea that a third Guardians movie was going to like drastically change the tide for them seemed unrealistic. Let's be honest. It's not even tracking box office wise as well as I would have thought. That doesn't matter to you guys. Box office is not important to the quality of the movie. It matters to me. I run a movie theater. We're opening it next week. But man, I think I really liked Guardians 3. I said I had a bunch of negatives to get out of the way first, but I don't really have them. I'm positive if I were to see the movie 3 weeks from now, I might nitpick more. And that is one of the reasons they love to screen these movies the night before the embargo lifts. It's why they kind of want to pressure film critics into giving their first impression, because generally speaking, your first impression of a large, loud, expensive action movie is going to be on some level positive, even if it's not on an intellectual level, just on a, I don't know, thrill ride basis, which is why you get so many critics coming out saying, I thought it was fun. But I thought this one was fun-ish, but that's not why I liked it. I liked it because it's like the first conclusion, let's say, that the MCU has ever really done. I know you're saying that, like, well, what about Endgame? It's literally called Endgame. Sure. But this is not the first part 3 that Marvel has made. Captain America is a trilogy, right? That's 3 films. The third film does not feel like the end of a trilogy. It gets sidelined to set up a bunch of stuff for something else. There's 3 Thor movies. The third one does not feel like the end of a trilogy. It is like a complete reinvention from the second one sucking. We just got the third Ant-Man movie, and that doesn't feel like the end of a trilogy. That's a completely separate thing for what the other 2 movies are. But James Gunn is the only guy who's written and directed 3 MCU movies altogether. Not a lot. I mean, there's definitely like outside interference from like above, but there's not like a bunch of co-writers and rewriters and things to my knowledge. He's essentially the only guy who got to go into this machine with a vision and then complete it, for better or for worse. Now, maybe if you hate James Gunn, then fuck that vision, right? Then you're like, well, who needs that? But tonight, man, I found myself affected on multiple occasions, let's say. A lot of the things that annoy me about the first 2 movies are kind of neutralized. I don't like Chris Pratt. I think his performance as Star-Lord is very irritating. In this movie, just by the nature of where it comes in their story and what his character arc is, he's muted enough to where like I was able to like him, which is like a huge thing. At this point, they've set up so many different relationships with these characters. They've introduced a ton of new characters, but they all feel like they just kind of fit in. The fact that this movie opened up with like Cosmo, the space dog with telekinesis, and I don't even remember if that character was introduced previously to this. It might have been in a post-credit scene. Just seamless. It was just like, oh yeah, that's Cosmo, voiced by the woman who played Borat's daughter in Borat 2. I didn't look up any names, so no journalistic integrity here. I'm just going to say the guy from that thing, because I'm not going to remember these names. I'm not looking it up. You know, like right off the bat, you're just like, all right, cool. You know, Sean Gunn, who has been in each of these films, both doing the mocap for Rocket and then also playing Kraglin, like the Yondu's like sidekick guy. Like he gets dramatic moments in this movie that are believable. There's so many big moments in Endgame and other like, you know, movies that are like of importance in the MCU that feel so, I don't want to say fake, that's not fair. They just feel so obvious. There's these moments that are like, and now this moment, and now these characters are doing this thing, and you know you wanted to see this. And it feels just like cheap. It's like if you like wrestling, you ever watch like when they have like those 6-man tags at house shows and everyone just hits their finisher like in a sequence at some point in the match? Doesn't really make a lot of sense story-wise or psychology-wise, but it's like it's a house show. Everyone came here to see these people hit their finishers. That's what a lot of Marvel movies feel like to me. This did not feel like that. Every moment that's like a hard-won, powerful moment for a character, I'm trying to spoil things, felt real, felt earned. Like it felt like we spent 3 movies earning these moments. And again, that's an anomaly. That's not something that the other films really do. And you can say this about most superhero movies lately, to be entirely honest. And this doesn't really feel like a superhero movie either. I know people hate when comic book movies do that thing where it's like, it's not actually a superhero movie, it's actually a neo-western. Like, no, it's not like that. I'm not saying that. It's just has the vibe. They all have the vibe of like space westerns kind of. But there's a lot of like, I guess the first film has a little bit of this. There's a lot of like Terry Gilliam in it, like the kind of background, weird bureaucracy stuff. There's a lot of like mushy, like gooey production design is the only way I can describe it. Like if Quantumania, the entire quantum realm just looks like storyboards from Rick and Morty that an AI finished, then the stuff in Guardians looks a lot more like considered. It looks a lot more like goofy. It's goofy as shit. It's very, very weird, but in a good way, in a way where I was like, okay, like, yeah, let's have an entire company made out of like organic matter and there's a bunch of like orifices people have to travel through. I don't want to compare it to Cronenberg because it's insulting, but I thought that was neat. It's different, you know, than what they normally do. And that's kind of the vibe I got. It really felt like every time I watch a James Gunn movie or a James Gunn anything, I feel like that guy has a lot of sincerity in his heart. And I think he has a lot of like raw emotion when it comes to his storytelling and his characters. But he is always battling the part of him that used to work at Trauma. You know, like he wants to tell you a good story and he has all these things and themes at play, but he also really wants to show you like a head just gushing and like exploding and stuff. So I think this is the closest he's ever come to taming that beast in a useful way, where like the movie does have moments that someone would consider like horror inflected, but they work, they play, and they don't overpower the emotional beats. And this movie's got a lot of emotional beats. The one criticism I really had was that about an hour in or so, I remember thinking, this movie's moving at a really good pace, and they're not doing that Marvel thing where they just stop for minutes on end to just riff and giggle. But then they did the giggle stuff, and I felt the giggle stuff was even more giggly and like dumb. But the movie itself is so heavy, and there's so much like dark shit that they kind of have to wrestle with that like you need those goofy Drax moments and goofy Mantis moments. So I had a moment where I was like, this isn't funny to me. This is silly and dumb. But I was like, but it's necessary. I guarantee you if like you sat and tested this movie, if you pluck out this 30-second bit, then the scenes around it are going to feel really uncomfortable. So like I appreciated that type of stuff. I was like, okay, I feel like a smart person's hand is guiding the steering wheel here. We're doing a real story. MVP status to Bradley Cooper for this movie. I've said in every Marvel movie that Rocket appears in that Rocket's like my favorite Marvel character in the movies anyway, and that Bradley Cooper playing him or voicing him at the very least is like my favorite thing Bradley Cooper has ever done. Licorice Pizza up here, but like this is, you know, the QVC scene in Joy, very good, but nah, Rocket all the way. I love Rocket. And this is like Rocket's movie, kind of. It really kind of finally delves into his history and his origins and all the stuff they do on that side of the movie, like reliving his whole origin and his motivations and the things that have happened to him. Absolutely pretty perfect, like aces. I don't remember the actor's name. Like I said, I'm not going to look these things up. I didn't make any notes for this. But the guy from The Peacemaker who was playing the High Evolutionary, because James Gunn like works a lot of actors over and over again. That actor, I've seen him in a couple of other things. I remember him being really good on the Underground Railroad, actually. I did a review of that. I think that was him. If I'm wrong, I'll cut this out. He, as the High Evolutionary, is incredible. It's like definitely a hammy, loud, yelling villain performance. And I know some people find those boring, but I thought it was really good. I thought it was horrifying and like unsettling. Not horrifying, like scary, but just like, just gross. Real life grotesque controversy aside, when people were praising Jonathan Majors' work in Quantumania, I was saying that I found it kind of wanting. I found it a little bit boring compared to the work that I thought he delivered at the end of Loki. I was like, that's interesting. The stuff he did in Quantumania is just not interesting to me at all. Everything else aside, I'm not getting all that stuff. I'm just saying, like, that's what I felt. Maybe 4 minutes into the High Evolutionary's screen time in this, I was like, oh yeah, this is like way more interesting. Like if you were gonna have like an underrated black actor step into a big role in the Marvel universe, whatever, this way more interesting than almost all of the villains they've got. I was really, really into it. And you consider the fact that the villain in the first movie is like Lee Pace is Ronan the Accuser, and the villain in the second movie is just Kurt Russell. No shade to Kurt Russell. Ending it with like the Guardians fighting like a guy who thinks he's God, sort of like Mr. Sinister, but without all the like bi vibes. Really, really fan. I was so into it. It worked so well. And here's the thing about Guardians 3, okay? A lot of the Marvel movies expect you to feel for the relationships between their lead characters and their supporting characters. And a lot of times their supporting characters are just like pawns, basically. They never feel like real people, right? Mileage may vary there, but a lot of the time that's how I feel. In Guardians, the relationships between all of the Guardians to each other, they work so well because it's the third movie. They took the time in the other two movies to endear you to every one of them. Every one of them has an individual dynamic. They're all pretty consistent, and it plays like, you know how people joke about a lot of anime just being about like how friendship is basically magic. You know, like just through our friendship we battled the whatever. Guardians has a lot of that found family vibe that Fast and the Furious series kind of has. Lots of movies kind of tap into the vibe of like, this is my found family. These are my chosen family members, and I love them and they love me. And we'll die for each other and all that stuff. And like, this movie does that very well. Like, again, that might not work for you. If that's not a thing that usually pops you in movies, then like, who cares? If when you're watching a show, someone's getting beat down and a babyface runs out to save them, if that doesn't make your heart swell, then that's okay. Like, this is just not necessarily going to be for you. But for me, I love that shit. Like, so many things about Chris Pratt are annoying. And if the whole movie had just been about Star-Lord struggling with the loss of Gamora, that would have bored the fuck out of me. But the fact that he almost immediately shuts it to the side to want to save one of his friends, immediately bought into it. It worked perfect. And that's what it is. It's, again, I'm trying to not do the thing where I tell you everything that happens in the movie, all the spoilers and stuff, but it's basically one half track movie of flashbacks about Rocket's origin. Horrific, fucked up stuff. Kind of gives you like a little bit of like Sam Raimi, Dr. Octopus scene in Spider-Man 2, horrific imagery mixed with like Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's We Three and like some other stuff. Like I was pleasantly surprised by that. And then the other half of the movie is the team getting together to try to save Rocket from whatever. I'm not going to get into details, but that's what it's about. It's about them trying to save their friend. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in between. A lot of characters have beefs and they resolve them and everything else, but they did a good job. I don't know how else to say it. Is like, this is the first Marvel movie in a while I felt like I could comfortably recommend to someone and not think they'd laugh at me later if they were like, what the fuck was that, dude? I'm not doing the thing where I like graded it on a curve because, it's just a Marvel movie. No. I mean, I thought this was actually really pretty good. Like, really strong. I would give it like the strongest B+, if that makes sense. I don't know what it would have had to do to get an A from me. Usually if a movie is not quite over the edge, I know exactly what it was missing. I can't think of what was missing, other than the fact that, like, some of the stuff is just too fucking goofy for me. It's just a personal taste thing, I think. It's like James Gunn makes some nice dishes, but if I got at a restaurant, I would be like, can you take that off? I don't want that. No, you can keep that side. That's okay. That's how I feel about his work. It's why I haven't finished The Peacemaker, even though everyone tells me it's fun. It's why I don't have really good feelings about making a Superman movie. But I'll say this, coming out of this one, I was like, okay, maybe he can do it. I will say, I said I didn't have any negative things to say about the movie, but I do want to say one thing about this movie, and I figured out that this is the best way I can describe Guardians 3 for people if you don't want to get into specifics, is just, if you think you'll like a movie that opens up with Rocket Raccoon listening to Creep by Radiohead, then this is the movie for you. If the abstract idea about being expected to feel things for a raccoon named Rocket while Radiohead plays is too much for you, then you should just skip it. That's the simplest way I can describe it. I was like, yeah, it's the litmus test. I feel like if you think hearing Bradley Cooper ADR to Booth singing along the acoustic cover of Creep as a CGI Rocket, if you could find that emotionally affecting as I did, then yeah, this is for you. And if just saying that out loud makes you want to hurl, then congrats, you can continue not watching these movies. No harm, no foul. But I mostly impressed, man. I feel like I'm forgetting things to say because I don't want to get into like detailed specifics and ruin the movie for anybody a week early. But it's not that kind of movie. There's not any kind of crazy like surprises. Like, what type of stuff do you guys probably want to know about? Will Poulter, pretty good as Adam Warlock. Not in the movie as much as you hope, but he's good. It kind of has like, I don't know. The only way I could describe him is like if Austin Theory was playing Homelander, kinda, and dumber. If that's your thing. Elizabeth Debicki's back in the movie too, which we love. The movie doesn't really show off the fact that she's 6'7" or however tall she is, but you know, no one's perfect. There's a handful of little cameos that are supposed to be really fun for people. Nathan Fillion's for one, but I was like, this is fine. This is the sort of thing he should be doing. You know, nothing crazy. All the main actual people are good. Like I said, Pratt, not bad. Batista, great. Obviously, he's kind of. I'm glad that this is like the last time he's playing Drax because this shtick is wearing thin, but he does it well. I thought Karen Gillan was good. I said the same thing about maybe Endgame, where I was like, I thought Karen Gillan was surprisingly good in this movie. I think she's surprisingly good in this movie too. People just aren't into it or something. But I'm like, hey, it's not. This is pretty good for what it is. And Zoe Saldana, you know, does a surprisingly good job of the Gamora arc. If you think about like the Fast movies where they bring Michelle Rodriguez back and she doesn't have a memory, and Vin Diesel's just like, no, but you're in love with me. We've been in love forever. I'll give you the DVDs to the movies. And she's like, I'll take your word for it. And they're just like back in love. I thought that shit was always like very goofy. But here, like they really wrestle with the notion that like Quill is in love with a person who died. This is not the same person. She has not been through the same experiences to be that person. And I kept worrying the movie was going to pivot and have them like, I don't know, she gets headbutted or something and suddenly is like, oh, that's right, I love this guy. And they didn't go there, and I was like very proud of them. Just, if nothing else, I was like, the restraint to not go there. Good job, guys. I will say this, my final words on Guardians 3. It's very nice to finally have a Marvel movie that feels like a creative team finishing their run on the book. If you read comics month to month, you know, you'll read a book and you'll love the creative team behind it. At some point, they're going to leave the book. And when they're done, a new creative team will step in and they'll keep what they liked about the other creative team's work, but they'll add their own stuff. They'll outright ignore things you may have liked and change things. It's cyclical. So when you read comics, a lot of times the comic you like is not, I like Batman. It's like, I really like Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Batman. And when they leave, I don't know, I'm going to have the same feelings about whoever else is Batman. You know, this is the only time in all these movies and shows that the MCU gave their characters to a person, like one creative figure, you know, James Gunn, and let him cook for 3 movies. And now it's done. And now they can put out an omnibus of James Gunn's Guardians. And they can bring the Guardians back with a new team and variations and other new creative people or whoever. It won't be the same thing, though. Like, his thing is over. His run is done. And he got to do what he really wanted. And I guess I left the movie thinking about, like, well, what if Marvel just did this all the time? What if more of these movies had that vibe? Where there was like, oh, you want to do Blade? here, make a couple of Blade movies. What's your vibe? Take it, make it your thing. But as we've seen, they haven't really done a lot of that, you know? So, I don't know. I kind of do hope that this is successful. I hope other people vibe with it too. I hope this isn't one of those situations where, like, I'm raw and vulnerable, so I think something's really good, and then it opens and all my friends are like, that movie sucked. What's wrong with you? Could happen. But I hope this one does well, just in the sense that I want them to maybe learn the lesson that, like, hey, let's just get more filmmakers to tell the stories they want to tell. You know, it worked with James, and he's going to go do it over there across the street. It might work over there too. Now, we might not get more of this from him over there. Like, because maybe he only can do this after he's done 2 movies. You know what I mean? Maybe it's going to be a situation like David Gordon Green on Halloween. Like, he's got to do 2 first to get a really good one. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I really hope he keeps this energy and brings it over to Superman or whatever else. I can live with a movie with a Superman having a bunch of random needle drops from the 90s that James Gunn likes from his Spotify playlist or whatever. I'm okay with that. As long as they keep the heart and the energy and the emotion and stuff, like it really did it for me. So those are my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy. Obviously, this is a very impromptu, quick review because I just watched the movie. But if you guys have any thoughts about the movie, you know, I'll be around. You can just ask me questions, even if they're spoilers. I don't care. You can find me like on IG or something and talk to me. But anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you loved it, please subscribe. Hit the little bell icon to get notifications when I put out new videos. I am going to try to be back in the mix now. Maybe we'll put out a new video next week. I don't know what of yet, but no, hold me to it, you know? And then if you want to talk, comments are always available. I love talking to all you guys, and I love all the love and support you've been showing me, and I really appreciate it. And I am now just realizing that I cracked open a monster at 11:28 p.m. So I guess I'll just go into this now and never go to sleep. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you're all doing well, staying safe, being good to yourselves and each other. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.